Hello folks, Peter Lawn here. Today I'm going to show you some features of a Blender add-on that I created that can help with object manipulation when designing bases for No Man's Sky using Blender. The add-on is available at GitHub at the location shown below and can be used in conjunction with Charlie Banks' No Man's Sky Base Builder Blender add-on, also found on GitHub shown here. As you can see here, I've got Blender open, the interface, and I've also got Charlie Banks' No Man's Sky Base Builder plugin already installed here. So if you don't have that, I'm going to show you in the screen here where to get that. But the utility that I've built uses Python code within Blender that sort of is a companion utility to this one. It uses some of the routines that are built into this add-on, but it just helps you manipulate some of the objects that you're going to use in building bases for No Man's Sky. And yeah, let's get to it. So the first thing you got to do is add the add-on into Blender. And it will appear here underneath the No Man's Sky Base Builder menu here. But let's go into it. So you go into the Edit menu and go to Preferences. And on the left-hand side here, go down to Add-ons. And what we're going to do is we're going to install the new add-on. So go to Install, and you can go to the directory that you have the zip file for the NMS utility. And the latest version that I'm showing on this is version number 1.12. So we'll click the zip file, we'll go Install Add-on, and when you hover over this space here, all of a sudden it will show you that it's got this Modify Mesh NMS-Util. If you hit the little left arrow button on the utility, it'll tell you what version this is. You can remove the add-on if you want to get rid of it out of Blender. In this case here, we're going to click and enable the box here beside the name, and you will see it gets added in here under my NMS No Man's Sky, and it's called NMS-Util. And it has a number of modules built into it, and I'm going to walk you through those modules today and show you how to use them, and hopefully that helps in your building basis for No Man's Sky. So the first module we're going to look at is something called the Floor Creator. If you're anything like me, you spend a lot of time sometimes creating floors in Blender for your bases in No Man's Sky, and I needed a utility that quickly allowed me to create square or round floors. So this is how a utility that allows you to do that. So when you hit the drop down, you'll see a number of sort of sections of this add-on, and what you can do is you can actually build, for example, a wooden floor, and it uses Charlie Banks' plugin to grab this object and put it into your scene here. As you can see, we got a little wooden floor here. What we're going to do is we're going to, and we can pick anything. We can, you know, if I delete this thing, I can also pick with this drop down a metal or concrete, and then I can also select a glass concrete floor as well, right? And when I build it, it will pull the right object in for you. It tells you what the name of this object is, and you can resize it by clicking on it here and just dragging your mouse to the right or to the left to resize it. If you want to not have those changes take effect, just hit the right mouse button on your mouse and it'll snap back to the normal size. And we can also select the floor shape, so we can either do a square floor or a round floor. So you can, it then just changes some of the elements within this module when you switch between those two. So we're going to just build a quick square floor right here, and we can, as you can see here, we can define the floor dimensions, whether we want it to be, you know, how wide we want it and how long we want it, and length is along the y-axis and width is along the x-axis. And then we also have the option of having the number of floors in there. So let's just play with this for a second. We'll go up to, you know, 5 floors wide by 6 floors long, and we're going to create this floor. And as you can see, it creates a floor very quickly for us without having to mess around and copy and build this out. So if you don't like what you see here and you want to restart again, hit Control Z, to get you back to the original object. If we now want to change the number of floors, let's say we want to do 3 floors, and each floor is going to be 1 floor height, we can now create it, and we can now see 3 floors that we've built of our concrete glass, which is very handy. It takes a lot of the work out of this. If you want to see what happens when you increase the wall height, so we're going to go to 3. Basically, it puts 3 wall heights between each floor level. All right, so let's look at how we create a round floor structure with this utility. So what we're going to do is we're going to build our concrete floor again. In this case, I want to hit the drop down here that is going to give me a round floor. And by default, this symmetrical checkbox here is unselected, and what that does is it will build a round floor structure basically to optimize the round floor so that you're using the least amount of pieces, but it renders this out without symmetrical layout. So you can see that there's some line, if you're looking at this, there's no concentric lines going out from the center. It basically looks at the sort of the distance or circumference of where it needs to place the floors, and it's just going to optimize those floors based on the circular space you're trying to build out for, right? It's maybe not the prettiest, but it only uses, in this case here, we're using 132 pieces for a 12 floor diameter round circle, so that's fine, 132. However, you do have the option, and we'll back out of this, and then we'll this time we'll pick symmetrical for that same configuration of round floor. And when we create it, you'll see we've got this nice symmetrical round floor built, but it's not very optimized. It's using there's a lot of overlapping pieces in the middle, and but you get a symmetrical pattern in there. But look at the part count when you go in and you look at. We're now at like 228, which is considerably more. So it's a trade-off between looking good and the number of pieces you're using. So the other option under the utility is this optimize for least pieces checkbox when you're in symmetrical mode. So if you select that and you build this out, what it does is it creates a nice symmetrical look to the floor, but it does it again with optimized pieces. So now you've got less pieces being used, 162, but you got a nice pattern on the floor. So those are just some options you have for the round floor build out. And again, you can do the number of floors and wall height. You can also do an adjustment of the circle. So if you look really close on this one, it's pretty good, this guy, but in some cases, when you build the floors out, let's try a 13 floor diameter, and we're going to create that. Yeah, you can see here, there's a little bit of a gap that's at the edge of our floors, and so this little section down at the bottom here allows you to adjust some of that. I usually put it to the lowest value in the middle here at 0.1, and then you can use the back arrow keys and forward arrow keys to adjust the distance to center that the floors are doing. In this case, I back it off to get a nice smooth finish on the edge of the floors, and there you go. So you'll have a little bit of floor overlap, but you'll have a nice smooth edge all the way around your round floor. And this is adjustable. You can do it in larger increments and move the floors out or move them in. Sometimes that gives you some interesting patterns, but it allows you some flexibility in distance to center. So the next module in our utility is called the Object Circle Creator. This utility is very handy. It can create a perfect circle of any object in Blender and in No Man's Sky for that matter. And we're going to show you how to use that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the Blender Build utility, and I'm going to drop in a pipe. and I want to make a perfect circle of pipes, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we can resize this pipe if we click on that and move the mouse back and forth. I'm going to leave it at its original size. And we're going to start with, say, 12 pipes in a circle. So we're going to hit 12 there. And we're going to do the setup reset initially, which shows us a circle with a reference object. The reference object is what's going to follow around the circumference of the circle. So if we're happy with this, we're going to just create the circle now. And we've got 12 pipes in a perfect circle. And that's all great, but I don't really want them laid out like this. I want the pipes to be end for end. So I'm going to delete those pipes, re-highlight our original pipe, and I'm also going to increase the circle to about 20. Let's do that. And so we hit our setup reset. Now the first thing you'll notice is that the circle that's created here and the reference object is going to follow as if they were being copied around in the circle based on its original width. In our case, we want to flip this pipe over so that all the pipes are laying end to end. And to do that, you can do that with this little section here called the object orientation in the circle. And you can change the different angles of that object. In this case here, I'm going to change the x-axis. No, that's not what I want. I want to change it like this along this circle. And initially you look at it and go, what happens if it stays like this? But there's an algorithm within this object circle creator that understands that if this is not centered, it will automatically center it for you on the circle and then copy the objects around. So let's try this out here. And you'll notice the circle will also get bigger because we've now got a bigger width here, right? And so when you click on that, this is what I wanted. And now the other thing I didn't want is I don't want this big gaps in here, right? So that is the next section in this module, allows you to adjust that. And usually I go down to finer increments 0.1 and I hit the back arrow key or the forward arrow key, and it allows me to tighten up those objects in the circle to where I want them. And you can get a nice perfect circle that way. There's another section down here that allows you to rotate or further rotate the individual objects as well, and you can see what happens when you do that. In this case, we don't want that, so we can adjust it any which way we want. I think I screwed my circle up right now, but that's okay. Let's go really fine tuning. Right about there. And so that's that. So you can do other things too. You can this pretty much works on any object. So if you want, for example, we're going to create a concrete floor. We're going to go back to the utility. We're going to go to setup reset, and maybe we want to rotate that reference object on an angle like this, and we create that, and we can create a nice cone shape looking like this. So very, very handy. Maybe don't want it to be like this. We want to change the distance together so it's nice and smooth at the bottom. And away you go. So very, very handy utility for creating a perfect circle of anything with no math. All right, so the next module we're going to look at here is the NMS wiring text module. And when you click on that and drop that down, you'll see there is a area here where you can enter in text. So we're going to say here, hello world, and we hit enter, and the utility will add a text object into Blender. Now, a text object you can't do anything with in Blender base building because Blender doesn't recognize the objects, or the game engine doesn't recognize the objects. But what this utility does is it allows you to create wiring around the font lines, which is really kind of cool. And so we're going to show you how to use that. So you can also select with the text highlighted, you can select it to be italics. You can also change the distance between characters. You can also change the distance between words, which is kind of handy. And so now we're going to go and we're just going to create our wiring connections. And what it does is it traces the font lines and places wiring connections along those lines. Now it's not perfect. You'll see there's some things missing here, so we'll need to add those connections within the NMS Base Builder plugin. We're just going to connect some lines there, and the E's a little bit messed up, and the O and the L's are a bit messed up, but those can all be adjusted and fixed. We can delete those, and we'll just reconnect these guys here to fix our L's. So you get the idea. You go through and do that, but the utility does the heavy lifting with respect to placing the wiring connections along your font. Now, the other thing you want to be a little bit careful about is sort of the size of the text that you're going to build. Just with this alone, you can see there was 111 objects used in this just this hello world. If you get into more curvy fonts or anything like that, you're going to significantly increase the object counts, so just be careful about that. So the next module in the utility is called the Object Manipulation module, and it has a number of different sections in it. It has a Move Copy Objects and Attributes section. It has a Clear Attributes on Selected Objects section. It has Alignment and Distribution of Objects section, and it has Align Object Faces section. So we're going to look at each one of these modules and show you some examples of how to use them. So you'll notice on my scene, I've got 4 objects in there. I've got a floor plate, I've got a pyramid, and I've got a sphere, and I've got a pipe. And what I've done is I've located them in different locations and different elevations and different rotations to show you how to use this utility. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to take the rotation of this pipe and copy that rotation to this floor plate. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this first module here. We'll highlight the pipe, and then we'll highlight the floor plate using the Shift key and the left mouse click. So if we move them around, we can see they're in a group, which is great. And what we're going to do is we're going to click rotation, and then we choose which way we want to copy the rotation. If we go apply, you'll see the pipe now matches the rotation of the floor plate. Now maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you want it the other way around. You want the rotation of the floor plate to follow the pipe. If we went Control Z and we reset it and we changed this and then hit apply, we now see that the floor plate follows the rotation of the pipe. Now let's take a look at the scale option. Let's say we scale our sphere up by a considerable amount, and we want the pyramid to match the scale of the sphere. We can highlight each one so that they're in the group, and we can click scale on our module and hit apply. And looks like it went the other way around. No biggie. Just hit Control Z and just change it so the active is being applied to the selected. And there you go. So now the pyramid is matching the scale of the sphere. Again, if you get the wrong intended results, just change these 2 checkboxes in order to apply one to the other. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the location attribute copy. So let's say we want to move an object to another object's location. In this case here, I want to move the pipe to the floor plate location. No problem. Highlight both of them. Click on our location up here. And another drop down will appear here, which either allows you to move or copy the object to that location. In this case, we just want to move it, and we'll go apply. So you can see now the pipe will move to the same origin of the floor plate. We can also change it so that it's the other way around. If we hit Control Z to undo what we just did and change it to go from active to selected and hit apply, the concrete floor plate will now move to the pipes location, like so. And this is really good. Or if we wanted to copy the floor plate over to that pipes location, we can do that as well and hit apply. And now we have a copy of that floor plate at the pipes location. The next section here is to clear the scale or rotation of a particular object. Pretty easy to use. Just highlight the particular object that you want to reset the scale for, and you can click Scale and Clear, and it will reset the scale of that object to 1. If, let's say, we want to clear rotation so that they're back at the original orientation when you pull them in with the NMS build utility, you can just highlight the object, click on rotation, hit clear, and it will clear the rotation of that object. You can do that just to a number of objects if you want. Hit clear, and it clears the rotation of those objects. All right, so next module we're going to look at is the Align Objects section here. And before I do that, I want to clear the rotation and scale of these objects in our scene at the moment. So I'm going to go to the previous module we looked at, and I'm going to highlight all of the objects and hit the clear button. That then resets all of these objects orientation, rotation, and scale. So now what we're going to go is look at the Align Objects section, and you have several options in aligning objects. You can either align them from the center of their geometries, or the negative sides of their geometry, or the positive side of their geometry. And then you can also, the next drop down is what you're going to align all of these objects to. Are you going to align them to this active object? Are you going to align them to the scene origin, which is basically 0, 0, 0 in the middle of our scene? Or are you going to align to the 3D cursor, if maybe we got the 3D cursor somewhere else in our scene? Or you can align them to the selection object, right? So there's a number of different options that you can do here, and you can play around with how that looks by just clicking on all of them. And right now we're going to use centers and the active object, and we're going to pick the X key. And so what you're going to see is they will line up along the x-axis, and I can see that I've got this actually wrong. It's going along the y-axis, but that's okay. If we don't like that, we'll just deselect and it'll go back to its original form and hit the y-axis, which gives us what we want. The other thing you can do as well is you can do both. You can do multiple configurations. So if you wanted them to all line up on the X and Y axis, you can just click them all together and they will all line up that way. You can also deselect, put everything back the way it was. Let's say we want to align along the Z axis, which is basically up and down. And the only way you can kind of see that is if we go to a side view, side profile, you can see that the centers of all these objects are lined up along the Z axis. We can also change the drop down or change the align mode to go to the negative sides of those objects. So in other words, it'll only line up the bottom sides of these objects here, and we can see that right there. We can also change it to the positive side. So if we change it to the positive side, you can see everything lines up along the top here, right? Now it's more apparent when you have different sized objects as well. For example, if I sized up this ball, sized up this pipe considerably, and looked at a side view and highlighted them all and decided to go to Z positive sides, everything along the top lines up. If we go to the negative sides, they line up all along the bottom, right? So there's some different options that you can do. You can line them all up so they're all in the same place by clicking them, all of them together, and then doing centers. So there's all sorts of different cool things you can do in aligning these objects. Now, there's also a button called Distribute Along Global Axes. So what this will do is it will bring up another pop-up window and it will allow you to align along the X or along the Y, and you can, or Z, and you can basically adjust their distribution or their distance from each other to equal amounts, right? It also goes negative as well. So that's kind of a handy little feature of, let's say you had a number of these pipes and you wanted them all, we duplicated a bunch of them and we wanted just those pipes to line up and distribute. We can do that nicely by doing this, which is very handy. And the last section in this module is called the Align Object Faces. And this is a kind of an interesting one as well, because there was times when I wanted to have one object's face snap to another object's face. And I wasn't sure how to do that, so I built this module for that. So for example, let's say I wanted to place this side of this pyramid onto the face of this floor plate. Well, how you do that is you highlight both objects first, and it tells you, kind of gives you a sequence of what you need to do. So select two objects, which is what we did right here. Click edit mode, and what it does is it actually puts these objects into edit mode. You can then click the face that you want to snap to the other face, which is this one here. You can see that it's highlighted because it's in orange, and then use the shift and left mouse button to pick the face that you want to snap to. And I'm going to pick the face of this floor plate for this side of this pyramid to snap to. Once we're satisfied, we can go align, and you can see that the pyramid is now snapped to the face of the floor plate. You can say, well, that's cool. What we can also do is kind of weird things like this. Like if we duplicated this floor plate and we said we want this end of this floor plate to snap or to sit on the face of this, we can go in, we can highlight both of these elements, we can do the edit mode, and now what I want to do is I want to pick this face here and I want to snap it to this face, and I'm using the shift key to select the second face, and now we go align, and you can see that object snaps perfectly to the face of the second object. Very handy feature and fun to play with. The next module we'll take a look at is called Object Replacement, and it's pretty straightforward. It's exactly as it implies. It's when we use this module when we want to replace, for example, in this case, these pipes along here. I want to change them all to the spheres. What we can do is we can just highlight all of the pipes and then use the shift and left mouse button click to select the sphere as the last object. And what it tells you up here in the description is says you're about to replace 6 objects with sphere shape 032. It also has a keep scale button in case you want to keep the scale. If you don't worried about scale and everything's at scale 1, you can apply, and now all of your pipes change into the last selected item that you wanted to replace them with. Now this is very handy when you have, say, a number of, for example, you used blue lights on your base, the blue pill lights for a bunch of locations, and you want to change them all to red lights. You can do that very quickly with this utility, which is very handy. Or maybe you have one of the balls is painted a different color, and you wanted to use the same ball with that same color throughout your base. You could just select all of the balls, and then that one is the last one, and then use this utility to basically replace all the balls with the right color. So it's a very, very handy utility, and it's very simple, but does object replacement. So the last module we're going to look at in this utility is called Object Along Curve. And before we get into the details of that, we're going to add a curve object to our scene first, because we need to set that up before we use this utility. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to switch to top-down view by holding the numpad 7 key. That gives me a top-down view of this pyramid right now. I'm going to just move the pyramid out of the way for a second. We'll just move it with the G key. Actually, you know what? I'm going to delete everything for the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a curve object or something called a Bezier curve into our scene. So you do that by hitting a Shift A, and this is add object out of the Blender menu. And we're going to add a curve object, and it's going to be a Bezier curve. Now, at first when you look at it, it just looks like this curve object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to size it up a little bit by hitting the S key and then just dragging my mouse to scale it up to a bigger size. And then we're going to hit the tab key to go into edit mode, because right now we're in object mode, as you can see up here. But I'm going to hit the tab key, and that puts us into edit mode. And when you have a Bezier curve selected and you hit the tab key to go into edit mode, you see this weird kind of herringbone design with some things called control points, and it usually starts with the line and then 2 control points here. And you can manipulate these control points by clicking on them, and you can rotate them, and you can see how the sort of herringbone line follows along as you rotate this this control point. In our particular cases, we're going to actually add another control point to this Bezier curve, and you do that when you're in edit mode. You hit the E key to extrude and build out another control point. Right? So now we're going to have another control point. You can keep doing this if you wanted to, but I'm gonna just limit it to 3 control points right now. And these control points are kind of interesting. If you click the very middle of the control point, you can hit rotate, and you can rotate this thing around. If you hit one of the endpoints, click on one of the endpoints of the control point, you can rotate just from that location as well. You can size them up and down by hitting the S key. It doesn't really show you much there. If you hit the center one and you hit the S key, you can see how it affects the curve when you size up the control handle. But you can click the center control handle and hit the G key and move it around to wherever you want it. In this case here, I'm going to rotate a little bit, and maybe I'll just leave it like this. Accentuate the curve. So this is my curve that I want to follow an object along and use my utility to do that. So we're going to get out of edit mode for this curve, and we're just going to hit tab to do that. And you can tell we're in edit mode up here right now. When I hit the tab key, it goes back to object mode. And so that's our curve as an object, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the No Man's Sky utility. I'm going to add a pyramid object. So it's going to be sitting right there. I'm going to maybe move it out of the way a little bit here. And what I want to do is I want to create a bunch of these pyramid objects along this curve. And I'm actually going to size this curve up just a little bit more. So that's a little bit bigger, and you can kind of see things going on here. So the first thing we do to make this happen is we go to our object along curve module over here and expand it out, and you'll see a number of different sections in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight the pyramid, and then we're going to use the shift button and the left mouse button to click and also highlight the Bezier curve. Now we're going to go into our plugin, and we're going to hit the setup button up here. And the first thing you're going to see is you're going to see a copy made of this pyramid, and it's placed at the beginning of the curve. And this is our reference object. And this reference object, its orientation is how it's going to follow along the curve. You can change that original orientation by hitting these buttons to change how it's actually situated, right? So if we wanted to, we could go like this. We could have it rotating around that way. So let's go with this right now, and we're going to go create. And as you can see, when you hit the create button, it's going to duplicate copies of these pyramids that are going to follow along the Bezier curve. And what it is, if you look at the right-hand side of the collections in Blender, you can see that these objects are all constrained by the curve, which means they must follow the curve. And follow, what do I mean by following the curve? If we select the actual curve object and we go back into top-down view mode and we go into edit mode, so now I'm editing the curve again, and we grab the control handles and move them around, you can see that these objects are going to follow this curve no matter where I move it, which is very kind of cool, right? And you can rotate, you can do all sorts of strange things and move those things around to get the kind of curve that you want. Hit the tab key to go back into object mode again. So if we go and hit this button here, you can see that we're going to be squishing these pyramids along the curve line so that they're tighter and tighter as we go. What that's actually doing is creating more and more of these constrained objects along the curve. But it can create a cool effect at what you're looking for. And you can play around with these to sparse things out a little bit more. In this case here, let's say I want more gaps between the pyramids. We can certainly do that. You can see that now there's a gap between each one of the pyramids as we go along. Further space that out. So there's a lot of different cool different effects that you can do with this particular module. You can also manually enter in the value. Right now it's at 0.07 or something like that. If we change it to 1, for example, we can hit enter and then go adjust. Now it only puts 1 at the beginning and 1 at the end. That's maybe not what we want. So let's just redo these. And you can see the effect it has by adjusting how many that are being duplicated along the curve. So that's it for now. Thanks folks for watching. Appreciate the interest. If you are interested in this plugin for Blender, you can get it down here at GitHub, the latest version. And if you are also wanting to see some of the projects that I build out in No Man's Sky, follow me on YouTube here and take a look at some of the other creations I've done with this awesome little tool. Anyways, have a great day. Thanks for watching.